Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Cernunnos. Cern is a medium area damage hunter with a heaping spoonful of area crowd control as well. Build-wise, Cern is very flexible. He likes a power-based build but can then go into either attack speed or a crit build just fine. I personally go the attack speed route for the consistency, but it's a mix of personal preference and what's meta. Relics-wise, you 100% need beads and Aegis. Cern is a hunter with no inherent CC immunity, so he needs all the survivability he can get. Now let's get to Cern's passive. When Cern is within melee range, his basic attacks strike in an AoE, dealing 25% bonus damage when they do. So this is a passive that doesn't come up often, but always makes a huge impact when it does. As I mentioned earlier, Cern has significant CC in his kit, as well as a wicked fast dash, so he's actually quite capable of slowly inching his way in as he lets out a flurry of basic attacks. Of course as well, this makes Cern really good at killing jungle camps. It's not really something you play around since it just sorta happens, but it's something to be aware of. Unlike Cern's first ability, which is basically a second passive. Once leveled, Cern is constantly in one of 4 stances, represented by each season, and can cycle through them at any time without any cooldown by activating his first ability. Spring grants bonus lifesteal, Summer grants bonus damage on basic attacks, Autumn reduces the protections of any enemies hit with a basic attack for 7 seconds, and finally Winter slows any enemies hit with a basic attack for 1 second. So the best season is, unfortunately for people new to Cernunnos, going to change very frequently depending on the situation and at what point in the game you are. Summer is just a great all-rounder for the damage, and the damage scales with your power, hence why Transcendence is seen so often on him. Autumn and Spring are good too, but mostly play a fill role and depending where you are in your build. If you don't have any lifesteal yet or are just trying to sustain off the wave, switching over to Spring is just fine. And if you don't have your penetration yet and are fighting a tanky target, Autumn is a good option. But hunters are always going to build these things, so once you have both your lifesteal and penetration online, you can basically just stick to Summer stance from there, outside of sustaining off of waves with the springtime. There are also times in the late game though where assassins and warriors, particularly the basic attack based ones, jump on you and try to outtrade you. And in this case, it's usually best to swap out of the Summer stance and into the Spring stance for pure trade potential. Winter only comes up every now and again, and realistically you only use it when you have a hefty life lead on a target and you're just chasing them down, or when you're crazy ahead and don't need the bonuses from the other seasons. So choosing the right stance every single time is how you want to play Cern in theory, but realistically just sticking to Summer while you're fighting and Spring when you're not is totally acceptable when you're new to the character. Of course, don't be afraid to branch out and learn how to get the most out of the character, but you can think of the Summer and Spring seasons as your old reliables. Speaking of branches, let's get to Cern's second ability. Cern fires out a projectile which will stop on the first enemy or wall hit, or when it reaches its max range, it will explode and root as well as cripple the enemy it directly hit. So firstly, let me touch on the root. This ability will only root cripple the first enemy that's directly hit with the projectile, and while other enemies will take the damage with the blast, only one enemy can be root crippled. So the ability's damage itself is just okay if whoever you hit can simply walk out of the area, but get that root cripple and a couple of basic attacks in and it's easily one of the most devastating abilities in SMITE. So put your head down and practice this ability a ton, because when that root lands, it's curtains for whoever got hit. If your opponent is just sitting way back, don't forget that the AoE still explodes once it reaches max range, so be sure to study the range of the AoE at the tip of the ability if all you're looking for is a bit of poke. That said though, this is Cern's only form of wave clear, and with a hefty 15-second cooldown, you'll need to judge the matchup and decide between focusing on clearing the wave and trying for a trade. The best time to go for trades is during the early game and a little after your first item. This is when nobody can fully clear the waves just yet, so focusing on damaging enemy gods has a lower risk, since they can't just one-shot your wave and then focus on hitting you with their full health wave. It's case by case really, but every god in the game suffers if they're directly hit with this ability, so don't be afraid to just go for it, especially the later the match goes, particularly if it lands and you can safely follow up with your third ability. Cernunnos dashes forward, crashing through all types of enemies, or so says the ability description. But yeah, there's no real way to spice up the description of this ability. It's just a really fast, high damaging dash, which you can actually cancel to start using that bonus passive damage at a close range. Again, like switching seasons mid-combo, this isn't strictly necessary to get by on Cernunnos, but it's something you'll want to master if you're serious about learning the character. It's obviously great for escapes, and in that regard, there's not much to it. When you get jumped on, or even if tanks are getting a little too close to you, boom, dash. Nice and simple. Using it aggressively is just as impactful though, with a hefty base damage and massive 80% power scaling. If this thing hits, especially in tandem with your second ability, it's some serious burst. Of course, don't do this every single time you hit your 2, that's just asking for you to get dunked on. But if you know your opponent's options are limited in terms of locking you down after you use your dash, or if they struggle to escape from you, it's seriously a nasty combo. Once you're comfortable with switching seasons, don't forget to use Autumn stance if you can before doing this, then switching back to Summer stance after dashing for maximum damage. That said, it's great when used aggressively in team fights too. If your team gets a hefty advantage in the fight and the enemy team starts to retreat, you can easily catch up to them with this dash and snag them with your 2, or even better, your ultimate. Cernunnos fires a huge AoE which detonates after 1 second. polymorphing any enemy gods hit for 2 seconds, which means they're silenced, disarmed, and slowed. So this is the second piece of hard-hitting CC in Cern's kit, which, funny enough, is specified to not even be affected by diminishing returns, which is a mechanic which lessens the effect of hard crowd control if a target is hit by multiple instances of it repeatedly. In short, if you clip someone with your 2 and immediately follow up with your ultimate, you'll still be getting the full 2-second polymorph. Still though, since the root cripple is only 1 second, and this ability's windup is 1 second, the delay after firing the 2 does create a small window for whoever you're trying to hit to get away. So you have to judge whether or not 2 ulting is the optimal way to go when one of you wanting someone. Typically if they have a dash, they won't be able to get away in time, but if they have the leap, they can usually get away before the ultimate fires. If they have fast hands, that is. For chasing, this is where the 2-3 combo comes in, or just 2, wail on them a bit, and if you're able to get a bunch of hits in, dash in and ult them as soon as they try to get away. That's mostly during landing though. In teamfights it becomes a little more complicated. Generally you want to use this as follow-up to your support's big engage, so try to stay close to your tanks and be ready for them when they go in on someone. You'll typically want to follow up whatever they did with your ultimate. I know it's a huge AoE, but you really don't have to hit more than one person with this. Remember, there's no DR on it, so your whole team has a 2-second window to collapse on whoever you hit. Again, with most abilities like this, you can try avoid using it on tanks, but sometimes that's all you can hit. On that note, in some situations you want to save this solely for self-peel, as again, 2-second polymorph, very good CC for self-peel. Typically you want to save it for self-peel when the enemy jungler or solo laner is fed. In those situations, you're doing both yourself and your team a solid by saving the ult for when you or your team gets dove. Speaking of diving in, let's get into some combos with Cern. For ability leveling, you want your 2 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, put another level into your 3 at level 3, and finally level your 1 at level 4. From there you want to max your 2, your 1, then your 3, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. Cernunnos' story has been a bit like Chalk's. Good when he came out, but slowly petered off as more gods were added to their respective class. But 1 or 2 changes and boom, an instant increase to their play. In Cern's case, adding that cripple to his second ability. Still though, Cern does lack a clear identity. He doesn't chunk life bars with his abilities like a Neith or Uller, nor does he shred through towers like butter. Or paper, I guess. But Cern does have consistency thanks to his high CC and good base attack speed. And while he's riskier than say a Charybdis, he's still more than safe enough thanks to his range and wicked fast dash. That said, his cooldowns are still way above average, so when you get it wrong with Cern, you have to stick to making the most out of your 4 seasons to make up for it. So a jack of all trades and master of none then. But if you're able to master using Cern's range on his abilities as well as managing his seasons, he'll reward you heavily back. That's all I have on Cern for now. Thanks for watching.